guys, I hope that you are enjoying your total lockdown. Sounds like a weird thing to say, but as an introvert and somebody who likes to stay at the house, I have actually enjoyed this somewhat. I'm having a good time being able to just kind of relax around the house and not have a bunch of responsibilities and places to go to. Erica's like, hey, why don't we? And I'm like, nope, can't do that. Hey, why don't we go? Nope, that's not on the list. Hey, why don't we? Nope. You don't know what I was going to say. Don't matter. We're on lockdown. Listen, maybe you are the opposite. Maybe you're like Erica and you're like, man, I am ready to get out of this house. This is driving me nuts. I just want to go to the beach. I want to go to the mall. I want to do this or that. You know, at this point, I'd be glad to go back to school, right? Well, if you are there, then maybe you understand the feeling of being imprisoned to a degree, imprisoned in your own home. But Paul understood that feeling much greater than we ever will, probably. He went where we are and far beyond because he was sent to prison for his faith. Matter of fact, if you look with me at Philippians chapter 1, we're going to learn how Paul approached his imprisonment. What's really cool is that when Paul wrote the letter of Philippians, this letter to the Christians in Philippi, he wrote about joy and unity. And that is just so funny to me because he's in prison writing to people who are free about them having joy. That they should have joy. And it's like, where does somebody that is locked in prison, why would that even come up? Like, how could you have any joy, Paul? But from his experience, he's writing and he's saying, listen, our joy is not based on our circumstances. It's based on Christ. And then unity. Paul, you're all alone. What are you talking about? Unity. And what we learn with that is that, you know, two people can be in the same room and be totally divided. But two people could be thousands of miles apart and be unified. Because unity isn't about closeness, it's about focus. It's not about closeness, it's about being centered on one idea, one point. And Paul is saying that one point that we should be unified on is Christ. So as he writes in Philippians, this is just so cool to me. Philippians chapter 1, this is what really caught my eye today. Verse number 12, he says, "But I want you to know, brethren, that the things which happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel, so that it has become evident to the whole palace guard and to all the rest that my chains are in Christ." We're going to jump right in, guys. The first thing I want you to realize as you are dealing with these difficult circumstances with the coronavirus pandemic, first thing is that Paul gave an encouragement rather than a complaint. Paul gave an encouragement rather than a complaint. He said, I want you to know that everything that's happened to me, everything that you look at and you say, man, that is awful, that is horrible, I can't believe this is happening to Paul. He stops them and he says, no, I'm not about to join you in those complaints. I'm not about to start complaining about my situation. He said, because this situation has actually turned into the furtherance of the gospel. What a priority. What a focus. Let's be honest. A lot of us have been bad about complaining about our situation. Whether we're complaining about our parents, complaining about our school, complaining about the lockdown, you could be complaining about anything, but the reality is, rather than getting stuck on complaints, we need to be focusing on encouragement. Not only encouraging ourselves, but encouraging others with the gospel and with good news. Encouraging others with, you know, I got this thing over my shoulder that says, count your blessings. Count your blessings. In every circumstance, count your blessings. As Paul was bound by chains, he looked at it as a blessing because the chains are what drove the gospel forward to these people who would have never heard it before. Secondly, as we look at verse number 14, we see that Paul gave an example rather than an excuse. He gave an example rather than an excuse. In verse 14 he said, most of the brethren in the Lord, having become confident by my chains, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. They've become confident by my chains. See, Paul set the example that said, listen, I don't care if I go to prison. I don't care if I lose my life. I am going to share the gospel. I'm going to push the gospel forward. I'm going to press this message and share it with as many people as I can, no matter what happens to me. And his willingness to take on those chains ended up setting an example for other believers that many more were bold to share the gospel. People who had never really been in that place before were now sharing the gospel because of Paul's example. See, my pain could be God's platform. Listen, Paul, his pain became a platform for God. His chains, his circumstances, his suffering, his difficulties are what God used to push the message, the gospel of Christ forward. Your pain could be God's platform to reach other people. To reach those people that you've been praying for all the time for their salvation. But guys, what I want you to understand too, thirdly, is that Paul gave an expectation rather than an easy out. He gave an expectation rather than an easy out. He didn't look at the situation around him, start complaining, start offering excuses, and then say, you know what? Here's the easy thing to do. I'm just going to give up on this Jesus. I'm just going to give up on these circumstances. If I just give up, then they'll let me go. No, he didn't take that route. He had a high expectation. And the expectation was this, that Christ would be magnified. Look at verse 20. It said, according to my earnest expectation and hope, that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but with all boldness as always, so now also Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Wow. His expectation was that Christ would be magnified through his body, through his life. When you magnify something, you blow it up, right? But think about this. If you're magnifying Christ, then what you're doing is when people are walking around and people are surfing the social media, they're looking through, looking at all of your posts. As they look at it, if you're magnifying Christ, what it is that where nobody else would typically see Jesus, because maybe in their eyes he doesn't stick out, he doesn't stand out. But when you magnify Jesus, you blow him up, you make him bigger than the rest. You make him easy to see, easy to spot. But Paul was prepared to do that with his life or his death. Paul set the expectation high. Christ will be magnified. For to me, in my opinion, in my life, the way I'm going to live my life, to live is Christ, to die is gain. So let me ask you this question. How have you allowed God to use the circumstances around you, COVID-19, difficulties in school, difficulties with parents, difficulties with your job or siblings? How have you allowed God to use these difficult circumstances to further his kingdom and to further the gospel of Jesus Christ? Guys, I pray that you would take advantage of the dark times to let your light shine to the rest of the world. I'm praying for you. I love you. If you need anything, please reach out to us. We're here for you. Although we are apart, we are focused, we are unified, and we have joy in the circumstances because we have joy in Christ.